can't start early.
I can start
You can start the table. That's the street.
Up in the back, Scott.
there. Yeah.
You cannot start early, it's against the rules. Which is not right, right?
Unfortunately, those tables. Yes, it would be really early. We're hitting the triple game Thursday. Friday's a free day.
When you're looking at next year's schedule, February and March, although the full, March is 5 days. February full is a very short period of time. First,
It's a bit.
third,
Always on the box, John.
in my hand. All right. It's 7 o'clock, we're going to call the meeting to order, ask everybody to rise and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would note for the record, everybody's here. First item of business is, as usual, the minutes, the approval of the minutes of the September 6th meeting. I think I saw two, both on page 1 under Mrs. Kale's comments. The word should not be putter, it should be pudding. And then 2 lines down, it should not be no parking, it should be pedestrian crossing. Those were the only 2 I found. Did anybody find any others?
No.
Seeing and hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Ms. Jordan, Mr. Trable, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, the minutes are approved. Next item of business will be presentations. There are none. Privilege of the floor. Anybody out there wish to address council? Hearing and seeing none, we will move forward. Draft resolution, resolution 2022-26. It is to approve the guidelines for donating to nonprofits. They were included in your packet. Does anybody have any comments?
One addition, I believe, that was changed or added as the new number 1 after the packets went out that we caught. Chapter 12 of the Pennsylvania Borough Code, Corporate Powers, clarifies what type of organizations can receive donations. One of them being, obviously the reason for this, the food bank. So an organization that distributes food to the community is one that is eligible. The school itself is not by the Borough Code, so since that would be a 501c3, so I added that number 1 is the request must be permitted under Chapter 12 of the Pennsylvania Borough Code as the first and foremost, along with the other criteria there that you saw. And again, it's certainly open to comment. This is what we could come up with looking around at what some other municipalities are doing and what would fit under the confines of the Borough Code.
I would remind everybody that these were looked at by our attorney, our solicitor, and approved by him. And the only question I have, should we add in there, we should send out a letter to applicants who don't meet the guidelines, or that they explain why, or should we just leave that go?
I mean, I certainly think we could do that. One of my thoughts is once this is officially adopted, which, depending on the comments tonight, could be as soon as the October meeting, we would then formulate this into a policy that we would put out on the website as a point of information for those folks, and go from there. So there's a formal policy out. But I mean, anything that comes in the meanwhile, we certainly can send them a letter or an email just kind of explaining where we're at with this.
All right, does anybody have an objection to putting this on the agenda for the October meeting?
I had one more question about
Sure.
it, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Under the 2B or 3B, there's a question about the last 2 years of P&L statements from the organization.
Yes.
Do we have any sort of like written PARs as to what we would expect from those things, or are these just going to be kind of like interpretive guidelines?
I would think just interpretive guidelines, what that enables us to do is kind of see what they're spending their money on. So otherwise, we really, we want to have an idea of what they've typically done and why they're asking for money from us. So that was the thought process behind that. And obviously a newer organization like this food bank is not going to have 2 years of P&L. So that's just something that council could take under consideration.
And not all 501c3s are created equal. I think the Red Cross gives out 98% of every dollar collected to the people, whereas others keep 30 and 40%.
Yeah, understood. I'm wondering if maybe in this process, we have at least some sort of guidelines as to what we would expect for an ideal candidate for these funds. Just have at least something on the books as to what we're looking for.
I think it has to be case by case. If they meet the general guidelines, then we have to talk about the wisdom. Those are just my thoughts. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I would be concerned that we by adding more criteria to that, is that we would unintentionally exclude someone just by writing criteria that may be a little bit too restrictive. My thought is that we have it now that they have to be located in the borough and they have to benefit the residents of the borough, is kind of a limiting factor that we're not going to see 500 of these a year, because there's just not that many located in the borough, so that we could take each one on a case-by-case basis.
And I would agree. There's just not a lot of 501c3s in the borough. Anybody else have anything to add? Anybody have an objection to putting this on the October agenda? All right, I think you have a consensus of council. I don't think we need a formal motion for that, do we?
No.
All right, next item, the draft ordinances, 871 and 872. 871 simply adds North Bergen Street. I assume they've met the criteria and have been approved?
They have, yes.
Anybody have an objection or a question on that? And, okay, anybody have an objection to putting that on the October agenda?
We would actually need a motion to advertise that
Oh,
ordinance
okay.
for the first reading.
Is
and
there-
then we might not make that, it may be November, based on when the
All right.
paper can run it.
Is there a motion to advertise this, to put it on the agenda, whether it be October or November? All right, we have Mr. Trotter, is there a second?
Second.
I heard Mr. Treble first. Any question on the motion? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. Mr. Treble?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Ruff?
Yes.
And Mr. Trotter?
Yes.
And I say yes, advertise it. All right, you do not have in your packet 872 that was sent, maybe Phil does because he doesn't get email, but I believe that was sent via email. That is to scrap the existing stormwater ordinance in its entirety and establish a new stormwater ordinance to comply with the updated DEP regulations. I assume we have to do this.
Yeah, so this actually was reviewed just for comment by the Stormwater Authority, and they recommended it to move to council favorably, even though, like I said, it's just a courtesy review. Ms. Smith was here at that meeting and explained that pretty much this is a combination of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission's stormwater ordinance and the DEP's new updated model stormwater ordinance, and it includes pretty much all the technical data and rules and regulations that someone else is telling us we have to have. So hence the repeal of the old one and the institution of this one.
I would assume we would need a motion to advertise again?
Yes, sir.
All right, anybody want to make a motion to authorizing Mr. Gratz to advertise the ordinance? 872, that would be Ms. Jordan? Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Johnson? Any questions on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Treble?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Roof?
Yes.
Mr. Trotter?
Yes.
And I say yes. Advertise that one too. No other ordinances. Old business, ARP funds for the Broadway project. Discussion on whether or not we want to use the ARP funds for Broadway. We can make a motion after discussion. So anybody, what's going on there, Ms. Smith?
So we received the second tranche of ARPA funds, which is 200, it's in your packet, but 240 some thousand roughly. So that money would cover the overages, including contingencies, that the bid came back for the Broadway curb and sidewalk project. The money was initially allocated for infrastructure improvements when we applied and got, or when we were receiving our ARPA money prior to my tenure here. So this obviously would be a use consistent with that. And it would allow us to complete that project all the way up to where the current pedestrian crossing ramps are ongoing. So it would neatly tie into that, and then we would apply for hopefully another MTF grant in the future here to complete the rest of Broadway all the way to the Salisbury line.
You're gonna start at, Bishop Thorpe and work up?
Yeah, that project will be starting probably in October. And yeah, the plan right now is to start at Bishop Thorpe and work their way up. So again, we've received the ARPA funds. We could choose to make a motion tonight. You could think on it and let us, we could revisit it again in October. But we have received the money now, and that is one use that I think is probably would allow us to complete that project in its entirety.
All right, anybody else have any questions or comments? Hearing none, does somebody want to make a motion to authorize the ARPA funds for the Broadway project tonight, or do you think we should wait on it till October?
Tonight.
All right, Mr. Trable, I believe, made the motion. You making the second? Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Trable?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Ruff?
Yes.
Mr. Trotter?
Yes.
And I vote yes, we can use the ARPA funds.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, budget time is coming up rapidly. There was a suggestion we follow the same pattern we did last year with the dates of October 26th, which I believe is a Wednesday, starting at 6 o'clock. That would be general fund and liquid fuels
And capital.
and capital. Following November 2nd, which is also a Wednesday at 6 o'clock, for the sewer fund, the health and sanitation fund, and the library fund, the fire fund, the miscellaneous funds. And then if necessary, at 6 o'clock on the 16th, that would be before the council meeting. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Any objections? Hearing none, you want to go with that? All right, that's a meeting of the whole, and they should be advertised.
Correct, yeah, and I will get that out ASAP then with this consensus, so.
Next item is the CDBG award. We got notice of that from the Lehigh County. It was in your packet. That's good news.
It is, so we again applied for that grant the end of last year when the period opened for continuing on the reconstruction of Jeter. This would be Kiefer Street to Hoffert and Hoffert to Bergen. We have not got the official award, but we got the unofficial letter from Lehigh County telling us we're getting the award, $257,100, which was the entire amount we applied for. So we'll be able to complete those 2 blocks with the community development block grant money next year.
That is excellent news. All right, the action item is, or anybody else have any new business? Hearing none. The action item tonight is the motion to approve the MMOs for next year. Now, can we do them all at once, or do we have to do them separately?
No, you can do them all at once.
Right, you had the memorandum in your packet, the MMO for the police pension fund, the MMO for the office staff, and then the final MMO is for public works secretary.
That is correct. And it's, I just want to note that I know we're in contract negotiations for both of the bargaining units, and the employee contribution could change. However, the actuarially calculated MMO will not. So what would change would be the employee portion and the borough's portion if the employee contribution percentage would change during collective bargaining. But the MMO as calculated by the actuaries will not change.
And Ms. Vogus is not here, but her work is here in the memorandums, how she arrived at the numbers. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Mr. Trable, is there a second? Mr. Trotter, any other questions or comments or concerns regarding the MMOs for next year? Hearing none, Ms. Graham?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I should have started with Mr. Trable. Mr. Trable?
Yes.
Ms. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Ruff?
Yes.
Mr. Trotter?
Yes.
And I say yes. That was the only action item on the agenda. Privilege of the floor. Anybody wish to address council?
Come on, guys. One wants to say something.
All right, we're not going to have an executive session. Again, I believe our next meeting is October 1st?
Third.
Third, for our friends out there who are listening via the stream. Everybody's invited. I wish you could come in person and participate with privilege of the floor. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
I heard Ms. Johnson. Is there a second? Mr. Trable, we'll have a rising vote. Thank you for coming.
I think that was the fastest meeting
I was gonna say, that's